Polytechnics in Africa in conjunction with Gambia Technical Training Institute. Fatou Jassi has the details.
Advancement was the main agenda of a two-day forum which brought together participants from across member countries. The challenges facing education in general and technical vocational educational training in particular need redressing to keep apace with the changing needs of the economy and the labor market with regards to competencies and skills. The Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, Fatou Mbaye, said appropriate technologies, technicians, craftsmen, as well as skills artisans are required to turn the economy of African countries.
The Commonwealth Association of Polytechnics in Africa, CAPA, should be commended for organizing this committee. And the same goes to the local organizing committee for choosing the theme Regional Cooperation in Tibet for Sustainable Development in Africa, and making Tibet as one of their priority areas, as this will leverage the socio-economic transformation of the region. We must ensure that the institutions present here, and indeed their countries and governments, are encouraged to exchange experiences and ideas that will contribute to the advancement of Tibet in Africa, not only during conferences.
Deputy Speaker Mbaye expressed gratitude to the professional manner upon which deliberations were made and called for CAPA Secretariat to make follow-ups and to ensure that there is a mechanism that ensures the exchange and transfer of knowledge amongst various Tibet institutions to improve regional cooperation. The acting chairman, CAPA Pascal Chiwi, in his closing remarks, challenged participants to implement the resolutions.
No matter how limited that effort is, we think it will go a long way in moving the process forward. Secondly, as we have already been reminded, what can our institutions do within their operational mandate? There are things really that do not need to wait for policies. Things that, and I address institutional heads here, things that we at the level of institutions can do.
The CAPA chairman also underlined the need for CAPA to play a prominent role in facilitating implementation process, one of which is the issue of advocacy in member countries. For Grts News, I am Fatou Jassi.
We'll be back with news from outside the Gambia after this break. Welcome back. Former South African President Nelson Mandela is back in hospital with a reoccurring lung infection. A government spokesperson says the 94-year-old's condition is serious this time. Mandela hasn't made a public appearance since South Africa hosted the Football World Cup in 2010. CNN's Robin Cano has details of Madiba's condition in this report from Johannesburg.
Which one? The statement coming out earlier today gave a little bit more detail than it has been that we've had in the past. Essentially, the use of the word serious made people sit up, be very concerned. They also said that in the early hours of this morning, Saturday morning, that Mandela's condition deteriorated sufficiently enough for his doctors to rush him to a hospital. So I think there is an overall sense that this is worrying. That said, he is breathing on his own, as you heard. But for everybody in this nation, his family, I think around the world, people are becoming increasingly used to these hospitalizations. It's the fourth time he's been in hospital this year. And of course, his health has been steadily deteriorating for many years now.
These are the most recent photos of Nelson Mandela, taken in April this year at his home, surrounded by South African President Jacob Zuma, his doctors and some of his grandchildren. Mandela looked bewildered and didn't smile. reacting with discomfort when a flash goes off as his grandson takes his picture. So different to the vigorous man who fought so hard, endured so much. The former South African president has seemed frail and unsteady for some years now. Public appearances have become increasingly rare. Too much effort for a man in his 90s. Those he did make, Mandela sometimes dozed off during speeches and seemed confused. His last official appearance was in 2010 at the closing ceremony of the World Cup in Johannesburg. Throughout the past year, Mandela has been treated here for a recurring lung infection. Now he's back in hospital, rushed there in the middle of the night, again suffering from a lung infection. This time it's serious, say officials. President Jacob Zuma has asked South Africans to pray for him.
The secret surveillance program is merely the latest issue to put the White House on the defensive. Mr. Obama is also been criticized for stepping up the U.S. drone campaign overseas, along with other concerns. He says what is happening to the U.S. is necessary to protect the U.S., but as CNN's Brian Todd reports, it seems to be hurting his image home in the U.S.
Wiretapping, sweeping surveillance, and enhanced interrogation. He was the candidate who said enough.
This administration acts like violating civil liberties is the way to enhance our security. It is not. There are no shortcuts to protecting America.
He promised full transparency, which he said would also be a departure.
The only way you can hold us accountable is if you know what we're doing.
Fast forward to this week, when it's revealed that Barack Obama's administration has conducted secret programs allowing the NSA to collect the phone records of millions of Americans and to monitor the online activities of people overseas. Add that to the fact that he's expanded George W. Bush's drone strike program, is unable to close Guantanamo, and goes after leakers with unprecedented zeal, and you've got the inspiration for comparisons like the Huffington Post's, calling him George W. Obama with an eerie-looking morphed photo.
Look, this has to be one of the most surprising aspects of the Barack Obama presidency.
You've even got the conservative Wall Street Journal praising the surveillance program, while the editorial page of the New York Times, a traditional backer of President Obama's, writes the administration has now lost all credibility on this issue. Analysts say previous political expectations for Barack Obama are in disarray.
When he was a candidate, the left was expecting an ardent civil libertarian. The right was expecting kind of a woolly-headed professor of constitutional law.
But should either side be surprised? As a senator in 2008, Obama voted in favor of the FISA Act, the legal guideline for the government's wiretapping program. But why would he have pivoted so far toward Bush? President Obama explains it himself.
I came in with a healthy skepticism about these programs. My team evaluated them. We scrubbed them thoroughly. We actually expanded some of the oversight, increased some of the safeguards. But my assessment and my team's assessment was that they help us prevent terrorist attacks.
But one civil libertarian says there's a more cynical reason.
I think many of his political advisors felt that if he really did carry out those promises, he could be blamed for an attack. He could be blamed for anything that occurred. So if you're always continuing the same programs as your predecessor and expanding them and accepting these policies, you are less vulnerable to criticism.
When we asked the White House to respond to the idea that he'd become George W. Obama, officials there were quick to point out the differences. Don't forget that President Obama ended the war in Iraq, they said, banned enhanced interrogations, and placed more oversight on the same surveillance programs we're now talking about. Brian Todd, CNN, Washington.
Revolution against Hosni Mubarak is in essence been overshadowed now by anger towards the current government that replaces him. CNN's Riza Sayeh has more on a growing movement to oust President Mohamed Morsi from power.
Burundi is on a mission to chase down cars, hunt down pedestrians, anything to get people to stop, listen, and sign a petition to remove Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi from power.
We don't trust the current administration.
Burundi volunteers for the Rebel Campaign, a nationwide signature drive against President Morsi and his Islamist supporters. This is the latest attempt by President Morsi's critics to get rid of him, and it's creating some buzz. The goal, find Egyptians, at least 16 years old,